I'm excited to invite Jamie Barton for our last talk of today. In case you're not familiar, Jamie is a software engineer who turned into a developer advocate. He was born and bred in Northeast England, and he loves learning and teaching others through video and written tutorials. He also maintains a Headless Dropshipping Starter, a Headless Commerce Resources, and also GraphQL WTF. So with that, I'm now really excited to bring Jamie to the stage. How's it going, Jamie?
Hey, great to be here. Thanks very much. Great intro.
Yeah, well, I mean, you made it easy. And today you're going to be talking about federating the content layer. And you're going to be talking about GraphCMS, right, where you're working.
That's correct. Yep. Looking forward to it.
All right, cool. So I'll give you the stage and we can also do a Q&A if you have time after the talk.
Yeah, that's excellent. Great.
All right.
Great. So thanks very much for having me today. Today I'll be talking about federating the content layer with a tool called GraphCMS. I'll talk about what that is and what federating the content layer means throughout this talk. But just before this call, I was on a call discussing the state of GraphQL, and actually federation is something that comes up more often than not on any call you're talking with anyone around GraphQL. I've got all these different services. How do I get them to mix them together? And this problem is only getting bigger. So my talk is actually very well fitting to that trend as well. So hopefully by the end of this, you're kind of intrigued on how you can federate your stuff through a headless CMS, and it's kind of you might think it's a bit unordinary, but with GraphQL, it fits right in. So GraphCMS is a headless CMS. It was probably the first GraphQL CMS, if I remember correctly. And it's something which I've used for many years. It's GraphQL native. It gives you, as a content editor, some powerful tools to edit that content. When you sign in, you create your models, you design your schema, you relate things, you use asset fields, and so much more. And what we will do inside of GraphCMS is give you a content editing experience using custom fields. If you specify a Boolean, we'll show you a toggle. If you specify multi-line text, we'll show you a text area. Rich text will give you some kind of powerful rich text tools as well. So pretty much what you'd expect from a headless CMS. However, when I was talking about federation, which is what we're going to talk about today, this is this idea of bringing multiple services together. And if you're working with content, if you're building something with a CMS and you're accessing that data over GraphQL, well, don't you, what if you have data in other areas that don't belong in the CMS, but some of that content relates? Well, we can kind of give you the tools to do all of that. So that is this idea of content federation at GraphCMS. So like anything else, it is worth talking about the past to in some way justify the future, right? So, way back when, websites and the CMS world, building websites, we were stuck with FileZilla and Macromedia suite of tools to build websites, and it was an amazing time. Can we call it that? It was a great time to be alive, right? Don't get me wrong. We had all these powerful tools. We could upload files to the web and edit content, but it was just a bit like we had this website and a CMS, right? How did it start? Well, the traditional CMS, if we think back when, was mostly websites. You had a website. It was more or less a theme that you could, tweak colors, upload background images, change, turn some knobs and levers, and it would give you kind of some customized output. And it was very tightly coupled to a specific framework, whether it be a programming framework or something like the LAMP stack. It was pretty much tightly coupled to kind of what was shown to the user, to what user developer could do. Everything, was just kind of, it was, like I say, it was a fun time doing all of this, but it wasn't a great experience. And more often than not, if you were building websites for clients or you were a business, you kind of just had to buy in and you get everything. Whether you wanted it or not, you paid for everything. And often with these, it was slow, right? Like it was really slow to fetch content. Like you had to wait for the page to go and make trips to the database and bring that back. It got really slow, and there was the back then it was just things were server rendered, and or you uploaded static files, and building those was a bit, it wasn't as good as it is today. And I talk about often, it was often slow and server rendered, because I'll come on to this in a little while on improvements we've made there. But yeah, the traditional CMS was okay, but it was often a bottleneck for going beyond. So some of the traditional CMSs, WordPress, Adobe Experience, Joomla, Drupal, and so many more were like what we used. They were the what we'd refer to today as the monolith, right? These are the monolith, and you get what you're given. But content delivery, well, this is what it looked like. You made a request, it would fetch the HTML. That HTML would kind of be generated from different files you have by talking to the database. That response would come back and build all these things and give it to you. And that took time. Everything from this point took time. You made a request, you were instantly waiting for something, which was was the best experience. It was slow, and this inspired the approaches we see today with static site generators, creating better caching and edge computing. Like, that's improved massively. So the present, okay, we have this headless CMS, and content's evolved. It's outgrown just the internet. Content is now delivered on mobile applications, website. I think my fridge has a display on, and that content is updated from somewhere else. Anywhere you see something is probably managed in some kind of content management system or experience manager, to kind of deliver that omni-channel content, the content as you were. So yeah, if you're a developer, you kind of get all of these different tools. You outgrown the PHP LAMP stack thing. PHP is still cool, don't get me wrong, but we have so many different tools today that give you as a developer so many different kind of options. And working with the Headless API, you can do that. Headless API doesn't care where the content goes. It's its thing that gives you a content editor, content editing experience. And as a developer, the API is to output content to any kind of tool or framework that you're familiar with. You haven't got to reskill, relearn everything. You can just move on. This is stuff we're familiar with. This is the current day of being a developer. It's really, it's moved on a lot from the past. And the headless CMS today, well, mostly it's front-end agnostic. Some come with pre-built starter kits, reference applications that you can use to kind of get going. But most of the, most CMSs will just give you an API to get going with, and build what you want. Most of it is kind of crud. Like, if they expose any APIs, you'll be lucky if you can create, update, and delete something in that CMS through the API. Most of them will give you kind of read access. But over the last few years, we've seen a huge explosion in the amount of CMSs, headless CMSs that have came around, and these are offering these advanced kind of CRUD functionalities. And yeah, as I was going, as I said about the past being tightly coupled, well, with a headless CMS today, that's fairly decoupled, right? Like, you can implement what you want, where you want, and just get the data from, a CMS. And that would be one kind of data source. And you as a developer have tons of flexibility. You can, like I said, you can use whatever framework, whatever tools you're used to. You haven't got to relearn anything. You can just use what you want. But like I said earlier, some of these headless CMSs are limiting in getting going. Like, it takes quite a bit of time to design your schema, create your content, or import it if you have something else. If it's not a greenfield project, you've got to bring your content, you've got to model it, you've got to figure out the best design for the data and whatever. And then you've got to worry about building a front end. And most of the CMSs kind of come with limited starters or reference applications that have not been maintained for forever. So sort of a meh landscape, you could say. And most of these headless CMSs today have APIs and SDKs, which is fantastic. Which is fantastic. And you can integrate with your Git pipeline and have content coming through on preview, deployment, URLs, and everything we're used to today with these atomic deploys. We can incorporate data from a headless CMS. But often with that rise of the destinations has also been a huge increase of the different data sources over the years. So the last few years alone, we've seen people, certainly due to the pandemic, we've seen people now kind of moving towards e-commerce. More e-commerce use cases than ever have kind of risen throughout that. And that's fantastic. We now have all of these different tools and services to support those businesses. But we've got this bit in the middle. We've got our content, we've got our PIM, which is containing all of our inventory. Maybe we have some kind of e-commerce payment platform, checkout or whatever. But then we've got this bit in the middle, which you kind of have to build. It's because the middleware, it's expensive because you've got to maintain it, you've got to develop it, you've got to hire people to kind of connect the dots here. And there often is quite a bit of disconnect between the systems as well. This custom middleware is mainly just kind of massaging data from multiple sources into one response to go to your different destinations. But what if there's something interactive on the destination? That's got to go through the middleware. Then it's got to go, oh, okay, I'm going to the CMS or I'm going to the e-commerce API, whatever. There's this bit in the middle which is just painful, and it takes time to develop and scale. We've seen a huge rise in the different kind of tools as well. So you're not just kind of confined to this little import box inside of WordPress way back when, or Joomla, where you had the ability to kind of build these plugins, but you had a little window. There was no source control. There was no kind of atomic deploys to preview those. And we've seen a huge rise now today in the different platforms that have done this. So Pipedream's a favorite of mine that kind of just allows you to have that code editing experience inside of the browser that gives you an endpoint to run some code, and that can act as my custom middleware. People can now log in, they can change that, they can use the Pipedream UI to connect different services. It's a lot easier, and it takes less skilling to build these different kind of connections. If someone places an order and I want to send them an SMS, with something like Pipedream or a serverless function, I can hook that up fairly quickly, as opposed to way back when, or even non kind of headless CMSs. But yeah, these are relatively painless to kind of create, but they can be kind of painful to manage in larger teams, or kind of just get started with this. And we've seen tools like StackBlitz that give you immediate access to something that you can get going and show with your team. We've seen amazing stuff with GitHub and what they're doing around the code spaces, allowing people to just kind of collaborate together. So there's fantastic efforts to kind of make this kind of developer experience a lot better, and in larger teams, and working with these kind of different connected services. So it's really cool. But let's go back to content delivery. This talk is about content federation and content in a CMS. This is traditionally what we may be used to today with a static site generator, where we have this thing that the client requests, and you get a response, and they get some HTML, CSS, JavaScript, put on the page. If you're lucky, you just get the kind of the CSS, JavaScript, and HTML for that page. It doesn't bring the whole thing. And the static site generator, at the build time, when you deploy this goes off to the different data connection sources, gets the content, gets any templates it needs. And this is kind of federation in a way with data at build time, which is really cool. So yeah, this is kind of the modern, this is an approach today to use SSGs to build these static pages. But often the SSG can be slow, right? We've seen CMSs over the years kind of evolve to be the fastest, the greatest way to build static sites. And we see, these static site generators, keep evolving and re-releasing and improving and kind of doubling down on their efforts to kind of improve the build time, because that's kind of a bottleneck for most people. If you've got a large website, it takes time to build that. If you've got tons of different data sources, it takes time to kind of aggregate the responses from all of those and build an output. So yeah, this does take time. And obviously, as your data increases in complexity, this is just a very small. I picked this from a tool called GraphQL Voyager, I believe, from an old project that doesn't have too much going on. This is, I think, a blog that has comments that people can register and leave, and comments can be approved or be in a moderation queue. There's very little going on, but that is what the data looks like for that project. But you can imagine if you bring in sources from external systems, or you kind of graduate beyond just a blog, this is going to grow in complexity as you bring in e-commerce and your payment, everything else. So as data sources grow, so does the build time. So what do we do beyond this point? What do we do with this SSG? Do we stick with that? It's the same, it's the same problem as what we had before, but just it's a different solution. You could think of it. So, and often this isn't a great experience if you're deploying something and it takes time to build. Your content teams want to see that immediate feedback. This is something which comes up more often than not when I speak to clients and customers. They create content and then they're having to wait for build times. And this goes back to what I was talking about with these kind of limited starters. If a kind of API, a CMS provider is building something that isn't using the latest tools and techniques to kind of get around some of this, it can be kind of quite a jarred experience. I certainly have loved using Next.js with their preview mode that allows content editors to kind of switch into this content mode that it kind of serves on demand the content from these different sources, which is really, really cool. So there are kind of solutions today that kind of help us get around that. But you've kind of got to do a lot of that kind of wiring up yourself. So yeah. But what I want to talk on for the rest of the talk today, and kind of give you a little bit of a demo on how we're doing things differently, is we would like to replace in some way that build process with GraphCMS taking care of the data access. We want to kind of federate your different content sources and where data comes from, and we want to kind of go and get that. We then want to kind of give you the tools to cache that, and we'll keep that and return that to you. If that data is then it needs to be invalidated, then we can take care of that as well. And the next time your users request that data, we'll send you along a new fresh version and we'll cache that. And we want to give our customers one API. As a developer, having to kind of mix between all of the different SDKs, I've worked on projects that have maybe used 3 or 4 different dependencies, and there's tons of different DSLs to learn. There's a lot of specific language about all of the different tools that I'm using, and I'm having to learn and relearn and rescale and keep an eye of change logs that are happening. And it's an experience. It's great. We've got the flexibility. We broke up the monolith into all of these different microservices, but today we want to begin to think, how can we kind of bring those back feeling like a monolith, but still giving you the control and the flexibility you need. Remove that need of managing multiple SDKs and APIs, and give you one API that's GraphQL, and it works with all of the tooling in that realm to fetch data, fetch content, fetch templates, and everything else. So let's go to the future. Well, actually, we're kind of there right now. Like I was talking about, removing this SSG need, the necessity to use a static site generator. I seen the Prisma Meetup talking about Remix. That is something which is, it's in connection with the return of server-side rendering. Remix gives us the power to, control some of that cache that we want to show, but also it's kind of serving that stuff on demand. And, the reason why it's doing that is because tools like Cloudflare, Netlify, Fastly, edge computing is now a thing. Everything moved to the edge. We've seen with Vercel's recent announcement with Next, they are moving more things to the edge, so things can get back to the user faster, and that computation is taken care of at the edge. So server rendering, it's cool again. It's cool. It is. And that's why Remix is really cool as well. And it's worth checking out and worth attending the Prisma meetup as well, because that's doing some things in this area to kind of show you, look, there is more in the ecosystem for people working with JavaScript to get content from whatever data source that it is, and kind of move all of this together. So I'm running a little bit short on time, so I don't want to take much more of your time today, but I kind of want to jump into a bit of a demo. But I kind of want to think just very quickly beyond headless, what it looks like for us at GraphCMS. So people have got these different needs, GraphQL, having different content services, and whether it be backend, front-end agnostic, and whether I provide content services, we think we're uniquely positioned because we don't really care about the front end. And we kind of provide you the headless content services, but we don't care about the back end. We will soon, there's users using this right now with our remote fields API, and it's only going to get better very, very soon. And that means we're back end agnostic. You could use GraphCMS, but not use any of our kind of data at all. You could just say, here's my schema, here's the endpoint, and we'll handle that request for you and we'll cache that. So we don't really care about you using our editing experiences. But what you can then do is you can bring that content into your project. Your content editors can then enhance that data. If I'm bringing hotels, say I have a list of hotels stored inside of my GraphCMS project, I could have reviews on TripAdvisor that I'm fetching through that federated API layer with remote fields. And then my team could then enhance those by relating featured reviews or things I want to show on the homepage and kind of connecting to those other services from different platforms. That is what we do kind of differently. We allow you to kind of connect on the front end and in our content suite to different kind of backend services as well. And we really don't care where that data comes from, REST, GraphQL, or anything else. So this is pretty much where we sit today. We have this available to anyone that's interested to learn about not having to build a GraphQL server, not having to kind of figure out how I connect all these different services together, and just use a UI that allows you to kind of plug and play. We do that, where we are now, this is using a concept called remote fields and UI extensions that allow you to enhance the UI with your own fields and experience for content editors. So if you want to give users their own kind of custom rich text input or text area input or drop down, you can use UI extensions to override all of that in the system. So you can just kind of be away with what we give you by default, and you can bring in everything of your own, which is great. Like, at that point, we're kind of content editing agnostic as well. So there's tons of different stuff you can do. It's amazing. And we do this, obviously, of course, with GraphQL, because we're GraphQL native. That's where we started. That's where we are. We love GraphQL. I do have a video to show, just kind of walking through this. I didn't want to kind of risk the demo gods and something go wrong. So I recorded a quick video. So Daniel, I will need to just kind of change to a different slide, if that's okay.
Sure thing. Yeah, let's do that.
Hopefully this is the right one.
All right, let's bring it up.
Awesome. So I can't zoom in. I do apologize. But this is the GraphCMS interface. And what I'm doing here is creating a model, and I'm just calling this remote model for the purposes of this demo. But this is if you've ever used GraphCMS before, you could create models like you would a GraphQL type. We'll generate the GraphQL type for you. You can then add a field. Here I'm creating a single line text field called username, and then I'm connecting a remote source. We're making this is kind of in beta right now, which will be available very, very soon. But we're giving you, as kind of someone that's managing your project, to go and configure where your remote sources live. This example here is a REST source. Right now, we're kind of pasting in what the types look like. We'll introspect and do stuff in the future to make that easier for you. But right now, you give it a type for your REST API, for the GitHub API. But let's say we want to connect a GraphQL API. Here we'll insert the SpaceX endpoint, and we'll give it the introspection URL. This will then go ahead and introspect that and return what it needs for the API, which is really cool. So now we've gone back to the model. We're now going to connect that REST field that we're going to create a new field. That's going to be a kind of a REST data source. And then we're going to specify the remote source that we created, the remote source connector, and then kind of connect the user from GitHub into this GraphCMS project, if that makes sense. And we'll do the same for the GraphQL field. We'll kind of add the field for SpaceX capsules. We'll then say what part of that API we want to do, what query we want to do, and then any variables that we kind of want to pass along. I'm not passing any in here, but we give you that kind of flexibility. Then, if I switch to the content editing side of GraphCMS, you'll notice here I've got no data for my remote model. But if I now insert a username and click test in this example, that's then going to GitHub and getting everything in there that has testing for the repositories there, and then all of the users, and then the SpaceX capsules as well. And all of this data is available through GraphQL. It's not just something that content editors have access to. I created a field that I inserted a value in, and now that value is talking to multiple data sources with that same value to fetch you the content through the GraphQL API that we provide. Now, this right now is all query based. We do have a Mutations API as well for kind of managing, publishing, scheduling, updating, deleting content, and doing those in batches. We'll kind of hopefully extend to the kind of the federation part here as well. So you can then begin to make changes in different services through that one endpoint. So if this has been interesting and you kind of want to learn more about content federation and kind of want to have a play around with this, feel free to kind of just reach out, join GraphCMS, ping me in Intercom or in the Slack community, and I'll get you invited to a project so you can test this out today. But yeah, that's my demo for today.
Thank you, Jamie. That was really insightful. I mean, it was a good throwback also to developing websites in the early 2000s when the LAMP stack was still a thing.
Yeah.
It seems like we've come full circle, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. I was just saying this on the State of the GraphQL talk, is we spent so long kind of separating the monolith and breaking it up into different services that now managing those is got a little bit tricky. Management is asking, can you release this feature? And it's not just as easy as checking a box or installing a plugin. We've got to wire up all of these different services. So federation and this idea of federating services and APIs is only increasing in demand.
I see. And we have a bunch of questions from the audience, so I'll go through them. So someone asked, could a CMS be, I think he meant accessed from an API. The API could act like a utils folder just for all sorts of clients.
Yeah, that's possible. Depending on the CMS that you use, you could, if it's a headless CMS, it's going to give you some kind of API. And yeah, you can just kind of create a client. If you're using if it's a GraphQL based and you have some kind of code generation, you can generate a lot of that code ahead of time and then just invoke that where you need it. And that can call to kind of multiple clients.
And generally, Jamie, do you recommend using, like, for consumers of GraphCMS, do you recommend using the GraphQL CodeGen in order to get all of that type safety on the client or on the consumer side?
Yeah, absolutely. We often see people who will just get started creating something, and then when you kind of want to kind of make sure everything's kind of type safe, a lot of people do look to use GraphQL code generator. That has obviously tons of different configuration options that allow you to kind of tweak it to your needs. And if you're using something like Urkel or any other kind of GraphQL client, then you can generate all of that stuff ahead of time. And then all you need to do as a developer is import something from an automatically generated file. And yeah, it saves so much time. It's really cool.
You get all of, like, not just the type safety, you get the auto completion, right? And you get this rich kind of experience.
Yeah. And like variables as well. Like if you're passing some variables to a GraphQL query, in GraphQL, that's, it's type safe. And if you're using something like Graphical or GraphQL Playground, it tells you what those should be. You get that same experience in your IDE when writing these queries or invoking the functions to run those queries is, oh, this requires a username. It's of type string. Yep, I must provide it. Like it's, you're going to get those errors during the, kind of when you're writing the code there.
Yeah, very nifty. Yeah, so Sake Codes asked this. He said, "This is awesome. Where can we try this?"
Yeah, so if you head on over to graphcms.com and sign up for a project, you can create GraphQL. You can create a project. You can create some fields in your schema, and you get a GraphQL API automatically, and it's free for certain, there's a limit on content entries and models and stuff. If you want to get started with the federation side, we have an SDK currently that allows you to manage this stuff that I've just kind of went through. You can add remote fields for REST endpoints and the GraphQL support, and should be in beta within the next few weeks. So if you're interested about getting, if you kind of want to try this out in the UI, like I showed in the video, just send me a message in Slack or on the website, Intercom or whatever. Just say that I sent you, of course, and they'll kind of tag me in that. And yeah, we can get you invited to this as soon as it's in kind of beta for everyone. And you can begin to try it, but love your feedback on how it is now and where we can take it.
All right, thanks, Jamie. And we had one final question. Can you make a good tutorial on full stack TypeScript? You may actually have one, don't you?
I don't have a TypeScript course. I am working right now with a friend of mine on a full stack tutorial, e-commerce tutorial using Prisma, GraphQL, and GraphQL code generator, TypeScript, and all that fun stuff. So that's coming. Once we find a designer to help us with the landing page, that tutorial will come. But we've been using Prisma, and it's been absolutely fantastic. To do that, full type safety and stuff like that is awesome.
Great. So Jeremy, stay tuned, and you can also follow Jamie on Twitter. I'm sure you'll announce it there. So that brings us to the end. Jamie, thank you once again for sharing your time and your insights and knowledge and experience. It's been really great having you. And I believe that folks can find you online on Twitter. You're also, recently I've seen you doing a lot of live streams. Is this part of the GraphQL WTF?
Yeah, so people can find me on Twitter. I'm NoTrab, which is Barton backwards. And also you can go to GraphQL.WTF. You just realized what my username was, didn't you?
Yeah, it took me a while.
Yeah. Yeah, so people can find me on Twitter, or they can go to GraphQL.WTF, and I do a new video on GraphQL every Monday.
Great. So check it out, GraphQL.WTF. And with that, I'll say goodbye and wish you a good night, Jamie.
Thank you very much.